After 150 days, an entire season of live service, and the first chapter of the second, I think we can all agree, while Battlefield 6 has brought a lot of good changes to its immersion, weapon customization, and new game modes, one place the game is sorely lacking is in its live service. For a franchise that used to deliver huge amounts of content via its $50 premium subscription, and be right up there in the pantheon of DLCs, with its Battlefield 3 Close Quarters, Battlefield 1 Apocalypse, and Battlefield 4 Final Stand, EA and DICE have really failed to innovate on how they deliver new content, severely under-delivering the past few years. And while I'm more concerned about foundational mechanics, I gotta say, while the devs note it's an issue of resources, it really feels like a failure of the organization. Going from DLCs that used to deliver 10 weapons, 4 maps, 4 vehicles, and early access multiple times a year, down to 5 weapons, 2 maps, and 2 vehicles, if we're lucky, for upwards of $25 every 90 days. And it gets delayed anyways because DICE still can't get their act together even after the years of development, hundreds of millions of dollars, and hundreds of extra staff. After decades of proof, it's clear that Battlefield's under-delivery isn't by mistake, it's by design. They've moved resources away from playable content towards microtransactions, cannibalizing the game's production, and delivering less than what players used to receive a decade ago. So in today's video, I wanted to sit down and talk through how I'd personally and realistically like to see Battlefield 6's live service evolve if EA actually cared. In its current form, the game is serving up loosely themed, detached content that doesn't really have any rhyme or reason, each season feeling separate from the last. But with a little more planning and commitment to a single strong direction, the game's service could easily build on itself, bringing new life into old content and enriching the player experience. So, like always guys, if you enjoy in-depth reviews and discussions about all things Battlefield, drop a like and hit subscribe, and let's think up a better plan for Battlefield 6's live service. First things first, DICE needs to map out their seasons with a little more care. As someone who works in creative, I'd assume they'd rough out the game's live service and themes months or years ahead of time in pre-production, and then divide that work up into separate teams working on thematic content for their team's season, eventually rotating as things roll out. In general, I think that's a fine organizational structure, but so far, new content isn't really doing anything to honor what came before it. A great example of this is how Season 2 brings back operations, yet is totally self-contained to the 2 new maps within that season. It doesn't bring the mode backwards into prior environments, and has a super loose connection to the narrative. Seasons need to view the content as a whole. How do these new maps fit into the rest? How do old modes feel moving forward? And how are new modes like operations valuable for pre-existing content? And currently, DICE is just using limited time modes as a cop-out to ignore supporting old maps or modes. They're clearly putting in serious time and money to develop things like the VL7 Gas, Nightfall, and Operations, so let's honor those efforts by having a development pipeline that keeps those mechanics around. A development organization that begins to add those mechanics back into pre-existing content after the season releases and keeps the game fresh across the board. I'm really worried the Nightfall mode will just disappear after Season 2, and mechanics like the VL7 Gas won't be used again in modes like RedSec. While not everything needs these sorts of mechanics, nighttime versions of old maps should be added into the rotation or become their own playlist, and things like the VL7 Gas should stick around as a gadget or levolution, like gas cylinders placed around the map. Battlefield Studios is clearly making cool mechanics, but are so narrow-minded in how they extract value from them. But what worries me more than anything is that after Season 2, we'll never see operations again. In general, anything we receive in seasons needs to stick around, especially maps and modes. I'll talk about this more at the end of the video as I wrap up my master plan, But moving on, there's one place DICE has shown some forethought: seasonal challenges. Now, Battlefield 6's challenges have always been a topic of debate, but the areas they've actually shown some value are the seasonal challenges, assignments, and endurance challenges, all things that need to continue expanding. First off, using seasonal challenges as a place to add new hardware is a great idea. DICE needs to double down here and introduce new weapon customization. Universal camos, muzzle devices, and optics like red dot magnifiers that we still don't have for some reason. Next, assignments should continue to build season after season. I think this is a great spot to continue adding in new soldier cosmetics and asking players to complete challenges in the campaign, similar to the vanilla offerings. Perhaps with your purchase of the Battle Pass, you gain access to a series of new assignments that build towards a very exclusive cosmetic. That way, EA gets their money and hardcore players get something to chase. Finally, endurance challenges are a great idea, but in DICE fashion are horribly executed. I love the idea of a grindy series of challenges that deliver incremental rewards, but number one, the current rewards are an absolute joke, like a sticker for several hundred gauntlet wins, and number two, the challenges are too narrow. We need endurance challenges for Conquest, Breakthrough, Rush, and so on. This system is ripe for expansion, but it's so narrow with such poor rewards. It's a shame that DICE doesn't realize this sort of long-term grind towards a big reward is what drives your streamers and hardcores to stay on the game. They feel they have unfinished business. Think about FaZe Jeb's camo grind or Destiny players grinding trials. A consistently updated carrot on a stick is something the seasonal progression desperately needs, with meaningful rewards and a clear progression track. Now, the last place Battlefield should look to improve their seasonal model is with its narrative structure. And while I know this is sort of a side note to the game's playable content, just think about what we got with games like Battlefield 1. A narrative that unfolded in a linear timeline, event by event, telling the story of the Great War, ending with the Apocalypse DLC. The game's music started upbeat, with bright-eyed men fighting in the beautiful fields of France, and ended in the gas-soaked trenches of Passchendaele. The game's music, environments, and weapons told that story. Weapons got more violent, maps got more bleak, and the music became grim. Battlefield 6 needs to feel like it's evolving, adding mechanics like Pax Armada's VL7 gas back into old maps, showing their logos across Western European landmarks, and fighting over heavily fortified NATO bases would add to the world building. Cairo is perhaps my favorite map, but there's zero sign of what conflict is actually happening there. It's war-torn for sure, but there's nothing to signify that Western forces are being driven out by a violent PMC. Adding branded elements into the environment, less generic voiceovers, and depicting these two sides facing off would really add to the narrative understanding of the universe. All of which plays into my master plan, so here we go. Moving forward, DICE needs to work new modes back into pre-existing content. First off, find ways to utilize these mechanics elsewhere in the game. Night modes expand other maps, VL7 becomes a gadget or environmental hazard on vanilla environments, and all modes work across all maps. Next, use seasonal challenges, assignments, and endurance challenges as mechanic to invest in hardcore players. Offer long-term rewards and introduce new hardware for all players in a system that's not just paying for a battle pass. Take inspiration from Halo 3 Recon, Destiny exotic quests, or COD's camo grinds, and create a wide-reaching series of challenges and rewards that work for all sorts of players across all sorts of modes. Finally, and the biggest one, make sure new content connects to the pre-existing foundation. Personally, I start to imagine how new maps can connect to the old ones as operations, which would be really fun if DICE continues bringing back remasters, creating a system of at least 2 new maps per season, plus a remaster that we get to see in a whole new way. Each new map can extend off a base one, leveraging new content to boost the old, while also using the fan-favorite game mode operations as a vessel to teach players about the narrative. Put in some effort, find a few extra pennies from your multi-billion-dollar publisher, and squeeze all the juice you can out of the content that's already being made. I'm not asking DICE to suddenly double their new maps or triple their weapons. I'm asking for them to be smarter about how they leverage the work they're already doing. But guys, let me know your thoughts below, and for everything else Battlefield, stay tuned and subscribe, and as always, thank you guys for watching.